Welcome to the Insights Unlocked podcast. I'm Nathan Isaacs, Senior Manager for Content Production at User Testing. And joining us today as host is Kerry Johnstone, a product researcher with User Testing's design team. Welcome, Kerry.
Hi, everyone.
And our guest today is Veronica Bogdacenco. Veronica manages channels and optimization at Tide, where she's been since 2022. Prior to that, she had stops at Fitch Group, Buzz Bingo, and Nectar Loyalty, as well as being an instructor in marketing. Tide is a fast-growing UK-based fintech company that focuses on providing financial services and administrative tools to small and medium-sized businesses with more than 650,000 members in the UK and more than 350,000 in India. Welcome to the show, Veronica.
Hi, and thank you for having me on.
So, Veronica, thank you so much for coming on the show today. To get us started off, can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you do at Tide and how it involves talking to your users?
Absolutely. So, one part of my role is focused on optimizing Tide's marketing technology stack, making sure that our marketing teams have the tools and everything they need to run impactful campaigns. But another key part of my role, which is probably more relevant to this discussion, is around optimizing the in-app experience. I look specifically after the subscription funnels, which is one of the key products at Tide. But also, I had to optimize different other screens or journeys in the app. So obviously, because of that, we always have to try to understand what drives our members, to these specific screens, what motivates them to take action, and that's where usability testing comes into play.
I think it's really interesting how you have also the marketing background, but also this work around optimizing the digital experience as well. It sounds like quite a broad and very blended role. How did you get started in working in user insights and getting insights from your customers and your users?
Yeah, you're not the first person to ask that. And I think it comes from the fact that, in marketing, you always look at your quantitative data. So you look at how many visits a landing page gets, whether those people convert and so on. But what you don't know is why that happens. And initially, I started working with different tools in digital experience, like the usual Hotjar and those kind of tools to get more insights into that. But still, a lot of times you kind of paint a picture, but unless you ask those people the questions, you'll just end up with some assumptions.
I think that's the real power of bringing qualitative and quantitative data together, is that they tell two halves of the same picture. So one of the challenges that can come with being a fast-growing company is how you maintain that sort of startup agility and nimbleness and able to respond to the market and to your feedback, while also growing, scaling, adopting more processes perhaps. So how have you worked to preserve that UX agility as Tide has grown?
If you have a look at my experience, I've worked from startups, scale ups to really big companies. And, the bureaucracy in a very large organization where you have to go through endless approvals and, brief everything in, I don't really resonate with that. So I always try to see what I can do with the tools I've got, with the resource I have as quickly as possible. So yeah, I guess one of the key strategies I found to maintain that UX agility is to try and sort of decentralize some of these testing processes. So, for example, at Tide, we do have a dedicated UX research team, but they're so stretched across multiple projects and teams, which means, we cannot always wait for our turn. So, also, the other aspect is that we're limited to how many tests we can run concomitantly, which means that usually the larger projects would take priority. So to work around all of this, I started trying to run tests over the weekends, for example, because I know nobody's really competing for those slots. So I'd launch a test on a Friday, 5 p.m. Obviously, I'd have the test ready. 5 p.m., I'd hit launch, and then I know for certain that by Monday when I start work, I'd have the results in. Or if I know that I need more people in those tests, then I would simply uh, log back on a Saturday afternoon and just, duplicate the test and relaunch it. Honestly, this takes a couple of minutes. And it was such a game changer for me because it meant I don't have, I did, I'm not tied to any of those schedules. I don't have to negotiate for slots. It's very easy. Another strategy is to reuse templates that have been used in other tests, because usually those templates are um, set by the UX team. There's a lot of thought gone into that. So I would just go in, duplicate it, adapt it for what I need to be tested, and then here you go, Bob's your uncle.
I think it's really smart to be making the most of that weekend time where you can launch a test, have it collecting data in the background and ready for you with results on Monday morning. It's a really smart way to optimize our time and how we use our time efficiently. And really interested to hear more about your use of templates as well. How do you, within your team, manage templates? How do you decide as a team, what you want to turn into a template, what you don't? How do you evaluate the effectiveness of your template library?
So I guess it depends a lot on what that is. If you think about a card sort or a tree test, obviously there's not much really to have as a template there. But when it comes to think out loud tests, for example, you have your standard questions around confidence and effort, which, like I think those should be included in any test. So I think it really applies for think out loud tests, and then for any of the more complex or like the advanced UX tests. Again, some of these things would apply as well.
And coming back to the testing over the weekends to help speed up your reach, make the most of your different slots. What are some of the biggest benefits that you see when running those unmoderated tests, and how do you make sure that you're getting the effective, actionable insights from your unmoderated testing?
Excellent question. So I know a lot of people probably say, well, if you invest, if you invite people that are not your actual users, then those insights are not as valuable. I tend to disagree with that because the way at least the way I approach this is I would normally run a test initially with some testers from an external panel. I would find some patterns, I would get some insights. I would then work with the design team to optimize the prototype or whatever I'm testing. I would run another test to make sure that has improved. And then in the third test, I would actually try and invite real members, real customers. Um, so in terms of getting the insights and making sure they're valuable, the way I do this is I try to quantify the feedback that I get. And obviously you have your success rate, abandonment, and so on that come out of box with most of these tools. But what I do is I actually go through, well, I used to listen to the transcripts before before ChatGPT. I used to play back like 2x speed, so as quickly as possible. And I would just mark them as good, bad, ugly. And then I would try and quantify and say, 70% of users said this is confusing. 20% really like this feature. Now with ChatGPT, obviously that's so much easier because you can just copy paste the transcript into ChatGPT and then it would spit a summary.
It's quite funny that everybody that I speak to that watches back user research sessions of any kind, nobody listens to them on 1 time speed. Everybody's 1.5, 2 times speed. I think it's so funny that that's so common. no matter who's doing the research or what type of research. Um, it's really interesting to hear that you're combining non-customers and customers and throughout the sort of same project almost, so starting with the non-customers, working your way to then testing with customers later on. How does the feedback between those two groups compare? Do you notice differences in the types of feedback that you get, or is it quite comparable between the two groups?
So I think when it comes to usability, like, standard things, I think would apply to anyone. But when it comes to more specific product or industry things, then yes, there might be some differences. Our customers, Tide members, as we call them, they're probably already used to to some of these journeys, to some of the screens or the names of the products. So obviously that has to be taken into account. But generally, and especially at the beginning, it's surprising how you know people that have no idea about your product can pick up on some things that need to be improved.
I guess it comes back to, you would hope that when you're designing a screen that anybody could pick it up for the first time and be able to make sense of it, a first time user perhaps coming along who's not used your product before. So I guess testing with non-customers in a way is like as close as we can get to perhaps testing with first time users.
Absolutely, and of course, we do target people that kind of match our target audience. So we look at small and medium enterprises, people, freelancers, startups. Um, but yeah, I think it just the experience has to make sense to anyone.
For I understand, one of the things that you also make use of at Tide is for intercepts or in-app notifications as a way of reaching your users for testing. So when you're using a method like that, where you're popping something up mid flow for someone, what do you need to consider in terms of when to make that intercept, so that you're balancing, getting that feedback without perhaps disrupting them in their flow?
Oh, so it's interesting because I actually came up with this idea um, off the back of a struggle to invite real members, via the standard process, which is you need to define your audience, you need to reach out to the CRM team, they have to build an email, that campaign has to go live. If someone's targeted with multiple emails, then they might not get it, and so on. So, you need to get approval from the finance team to pay out these incentives. Like the whole process is so convoluted that I thought, surely there must be something easier than this. So, because we already have in app notifications, which are based on, um, you know, thousands of data points that we've got, then I thought surely we could just invite them to take part in these tests through these in-app notifications. So at Tide specifically, they're placed in, a few points in the app, so it wouldn't necessarily interrupt their journey. However, in some of my previous companies, yes, we used the Hotjar of I think it's called survey, or the small thing that pops in the corner of your screen, and obviously that can be triggered on specific landing pages. It can be triggered based on specific actions, if your Hotjar is set up in the right way. So again, yes, they can be a bit intrusive, but they shouldn't stop the user from actually finalizing whatever journey they're on.
And when you run research in this way versus perhaps a more traditional email campaign, but besides the recruitment part of it, are there any other differences or benefits that you see to taking the in-app intercept approach?
Oh, absolutely. We don't have to necessarily go through the process of getting budget approved, because you'd be surprised how many users just want to be heard and to share their opinion on something. So yeah, I think this is a key advantage. Once someone receives an email, you go through the whole thing and probably ask, what's in it for me? why would I give you my time? This is usually they're moderated sessions which need to be scheduled in advance and so on. Whereas with an in-app notification, there's something that you can see on your screen. Hey, do you have 5 minutes for this quick test? And I think that's key, because a lot of the moderated sessions are so long, or even like surveys that you receive, you get to sort of question number 15 and you're already bored and you want to drop off. Whereas the key with these tests is just to keep them very short and very focused. And then, yeah, a lot of people just want to take part and they don't have to be necessarily paid for that.
It sounds like you've been doing a lot of research over a long period of time, building up a lot of insight and understanding into your customers. As you build up that knowledge and you've got all that past research that you can draw on, how do you then reuse that data perhaps going forwards and to answer new or different questions that come up in the future?
Um, so, when it comes to what sole traders need versus registered businesses, or a company's just starting out versus an established one, I think these are all things that, we just need to build upon. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. Um, and I'm sure as Tide continues to grow, these insights will just keep on growing. But I think for any um, for any specific things that we want to validate, I always recommend running tests, even if it's something quick, dirty, easy. It's better to validate something, even if maybe the answer isn't 100% accurate, than to not even go through that process and then build something that people might not know how to use or might dislike.
Yeah, I think sometimes, like as a researcher myself, we get very caught up in doing the best research that we can, doing the perfect research, the most rigorous research, um, but sometimes imperfect research. And if it gets us a little bit closer, if it de-risks a decision a little bit, now we can't eliminate all risk, but if we can know a little bit more than we did before we started the piece of research, that can be just as valuable as the perfect research study would be.
Absolutely. And actually, there's a funny story from my time at the Switch Group, when one of the brands under the umbrella wanted to do a complete website redesign. And they were working with an agency that came up with this really cool design. It looked great, but I looked at it and I thought, has this been tested? They said, no, we don't really have time. We just want to start development as quickly as possible. And I just took the initiative to run a super quick think out loud test. And what I found was that most people thought it was actually a recruitment agency website based on the design and the content that was put together. And when I showed this to the senior leadership team, they had a bit of a shock. So we went through quite a few iterations to the point where we finally managed to convey the unique selling proposition, the value proposition. So that was interesting.
Definitely sounds it. And in terms of your current research process at Tide, you talked a little bit before about the iterative process of doing research throughout the development life cycle. So it certainly sounds like it's very embedded into your workflow and your processes. How did you get to that point of it being an integral routine part of your workflow?
Oh, um, I don't know. Like for me, this is a given. I'm not sure if s- my colleagues also see usability testing in the same way. But for me, building something, investing all that resource into building something, putting something live that I don't know how it's gonna work, I just think, and even if it comes to experiments, because a lot of times we say, oh, we're just gonna run an experiment with live users, but then there's so many variations. Like there's so many things we could be testing. How do I know what our best bet is? And that's how yeah. I would approach it. I'd probably just run a few usability tests, figure out the two best variations, and then we could build the experiment and test with real users.
We can't do a tech podcast without asking the question that everybody wants to know about, the AI question. So, in terms of the research that you do at Tide, as AI continues to sort of grow, develop, become more advanced, how can you see that potentially changing the way that you approach gathering user insights?
Oh, so I think the AI will be sort of your dedicated UX researcher. I think it's already reshaping the field. It can help you select the right test. It can help you draft a script, summarize results. It just makes the whole process way more efficient. So I think in the future, it will go even further, maybe analyzing like nonverbal cues, facial expressions, eye movement during tests. And I know this sounds quite futuristic, but I actually think, we will soon be able to decode some of these emotional responses in real time. And this is going to be like a whole new layer of insight.
And if we do get to that future where we have the AI that can do the visual cues, the facial expressions, that can give you that emotional insight in real time, how could you see that you using that, and what impact might that have? What might that enable for you?
Um, I think obviously it's an amazing opportunity, and I'm not sure exactly what the ethical implications would be, especially in highly regulated industries such as finance or gambling, for example. But I would absolutely love to try it at least and see the value that I would get. But I assume again a lot of the testers would probably not want to share that because right now most of it is just audio. So imagine, having to be recorded and know that all your facial expressions and eye movement are being monitored. I think that can be a bit scary for a lot of people. So yeah, definitely want to try it. I need to see what it involves, even in terms of cost and yeah, but excited about these changes.
And you mentioned a little bit there about regulated industries, things like finance and healthcare. So obviously Tide being in the finance space, how does being in a regulated industry affect or shape your approach to gathering user insights? Does it have any impact at all, or are there things that you do need to consider?
Not so much. I mean, some of the things that are regulated is, sorry, the ads. For us, in terms of the in-app conversion funnels, it's not as much, but obviously we need to make sure that the information conveyed is not misleading. We have to make sure that things are very clear. So we do have that consumer duty. We have to make sure that we're not tricking our members into making decisions that they wouldn't benefit from. So in terms of testing, yeah, it's just around making sure journeys are clear, content is clear, people understand what they're signing up for.
So almost like checking that clarity, checking that understandability of the product that you're offering through doing testing with your users.
Exactly.
And so thinking about the journey ahead for Tide as you continue to grow and scale, um, what changes do you think that might have for how you approach user research as you scale even further?
Um, for me personally, I don't think I'm going to be as involved, as hands-on in these things, even though I absolutely love this kind of work. Um, but I do think that other teams would start probably using some of these tricks and some of these workarounds, uh, because we'd still have the same limitations. And, with more and more product teams, obviously there's just additional need. So yeah, this is what I think will happen. And also another probably important aspect is that, as we grow, and a lot of times There's just pressure to get things built and get them live. When this happens and results aren't that great, you have to look back and be honest about what went wrong. And I think we as a business will start to try and de-risk some of these decisions and make sure that, yes, we do invest a bit more time upfront, but once something is built and live, it does yield the results that we were hoping for.
So you mentioned a little bit there about the pressure to deliver quickly, to hit deadlines. How do you balance that fast delivery with making sure that you're getting that all important user feedback throughout your development process?
Yeah, as I said, it's just trying to get any kind of insights rather than waiting for the perfect insights, waiting for a whole UX research team to sit down and, lay it all and have a nice deck at the end of the research process for you to review and share um, with your manager. So yeah, just getting any kind of insights will be key.
And when it comes to people who maybe at other companies in a similar position to you are trying to balance that period of growth and scale with still being able to be agile, user centric, what advice would you have for other people in that position who are balancing growth and agility when it comes to user feedback?
My advice is mainly to the leaders in those organizations. I think they should empower their teams to gather and interpret these insights, even if the resources or time is limited. Um, I think it's always cheaper and easier to make changes early on, and they need to understand that. And then to the people working on actual tests, I think, yeah, don't wait for a perfect solution. Just do what you can in the time you've got with the resources you have.
Thank you so much for being on the show. I have really enjoyed our conversation today and hearing about how you use user insights at Tide. If somebody wanted to learn more about you, about your thought leadership, or about the work that you do at Tide, where could they find out more?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I have a very peculiar name, and I'm the only person with that name, so you'll definitely find me there. But yeah, I'd love to hear from anyone interested in discussing these ideas, sharing their experiences with similar challenges.
Well, again, thank you so much for being on the show today and for having this conversation.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I enjoyed it.